your mind.
Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And myself, Stephen George. Good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 2nd of October 2016 and the prediction last week was that the dollar would collapse on the 27th of September, and the financial experts were convinced 100% that the dollar would collapse on the 27th of December, and it didn't. So there you go. You know, when you're given dates, best not believe them. Now, we know the yuan has been added to the SDR global currency basket as of the 1st of October. So that's going to be fun and games if that's classed as a default currency rather than the dollar. But we'll just have to keep an eye on that. And obviously, later on, we're going to be talking about the Deutsche Bank and what's going on there. But good evening to everybody and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. Now, before we crack on, let's find out what the communication channels are.
Okay, communication channels this evening are...
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Yes, the phone number again, 046 927 1212. If you're going to call in from outside the Republic of Ireland, the phone number is 00353 469 271212. We also have the text line as well, if anybody wants to text during the show. That number is, if you're calling from Ireland, it's 087 4034 854. If you're going to call in from, or text in, from outside of Republic of Ireland, 00353 874 034 854. Again, that number, if you didn't get it, will be found on the front page of the website as well. Speaking of the website, oymradio.com, you can check that out, and the chat room there, links for the chat room, the Twitter feed, the Facebook anti-social media, they're all there, so do check those out. And as I say from time to time, if you're listening to the show either live or on the podcast, why not drop us an email, info@oymradio.com, just to let us know that you're listening. Maybe just a quick one-line email, let us know where you're listening from, and that would be fantastic also. Big hi to everyone already logged into our own chat room, and unfortunately, for reasons beyond their control, I cannot seem to get into people's internet radio chat room, but I will try, and if we do get in, then we will take questions from that chat room as well. Alan.
Cheers, Steve. Right, our guest on the show tonight is Dr. Guy McPherson, and we're going to talk about humanity's extinction and what's going on the planet, and maybe the things that we need to do to stop it from happening. So we'll be bringing Guy on in a few minutes, but as usual, we have a few things to talk about, and we'll go over to Steve first.
Yes, over to the news desk. The Department of Foreign Affairs here in Ireland has said it's actively seeking to buy a home for its ambassador to Japan after the recent disclosure that the state is paying €46,000 a month to rent an apartment in Tokyo. That's unreal. I mean, they're spending that amount of money. We've got a lot of stories that are going to follow on, where it'll show you where that money could be better spent. But 46,000 a month, not even a year.
I mean, them taps must be gold plated in that flat that they're renting. This is why all the money that we give them in taxes is used for their lap of luxury, for the elite's luxury, and they just spend the money willy-nilly because it's not their money. It's from the public purse, and we keep saying this to people. When you are in a private company, the money is managed, and you can't go off squandering it. You're given a budget, and you have to manage your budget. And if you don't spend all your budget in the year, well, chances are your budget's going to be cut the following year. That's normally how private companies work. But with the public side of things, in public companies, government, the more money they spend, the more they seem to be successful with it, or the more they have a pat on the back for doing it. So, again, something has to be done about that. But the next issue, which again we're talking about money and the waste of money that our government it spends, and they reward themselves with huge pensions. Now, apparently, there's a lot of councils around Ireland looking to raise the actual property tax charge for around all the councils, and yet the politicians want to give themselves a pay rise as well. you know, the irony of the whole lot is just unbelievable. Now, I don't know whether people seen this. This was in the Independent.ie, and there was a story about a homeless man's final meal was firelighters because he was hungry, and that was the only thing that was there to eat, firelighters, and that was his last meal. And he had them hours before he died, and this was obviously checked out in an inquest. There was an inquest regarding his death. I mean, this is just unbelievable. This is 2016, and it just gets my blood boiling that 2016 people are having firelighters to eat, and obviously it killed them. And yet these smug politicians are rewarding themselves for doing a terrible, incompetent job, and spending money willy-nilly when they should go into proper resources that's going around.
And that's actually not many miles away from a story we heard a couple of years ago that we reported on, where a family were so hungry that they were actually, when they ran out of cornflakes, they were actually breaking up the cardboard and eating the cardboard just to stave off hunger.
We heard about that. I mean, that is just unbelievable in 2016. And every time I see that smug twat's face, Enda Kenny, you just feel like slapping it, you know. And I hate to be, you know, more graphic, but you do. It's just that he has just had that smug face on him, you know. And then apparently there was a radio, one of the presenters on TV3, Dublin 4, person, I would more than likely say, she's saying we are out of the recession, apparently.
Well, they obviously have to. I mean, you know, you have the spin doctors who are spinning it, and the politicians. Well, look, we all know the politicians. They're a million miles away from reality anyway, and we have spin doctors just spinning it, and obviously it just gets out there, and people are happy enough on the mainstream to report that we're out of the recession. I mean, they've been reporting that we're out of the recession, depending on where you listen to, for the past 6 months. You know, I mean, nothing could be further from the truth.
They're just so disjointed from society and what's going on. They just don't have a clue. Anyway, Steve, you're up next.
Yes, I'm up next. We have some news from the Evening Echo, and it says Gardaí fear that criminals will take advantage of their upcoming strike action, but say they have no alternative. And I guess that's obviously for people who are wondering, it's the Gardaí who are going on strike, not the criminals. But yeah, there is talk of the Gardaí laying down tools and, you know, going on strike. I remember that they'd done it years ago, and yeah, I don't think anything bad happened at all. But we have an OYM comment that we want to just kind of throw in there, and that is that they don't catch many criminals anyway, that is the Gardaí, because they're usually too busy dealing with water meter protesters for Mr. Dennis O'Brien.
That's it. I mean, that's what they tend to do. And if you ring up the 911 and report a crime or something, you have a burglary and stuff like that, they probably take 2 or 3, 4 hours to come out to your house. So I don't see we're going to be much of a difference. I mean, they're talking about, we'll have to get the army out because if the police aren't there. To be honest with you, there won't be much of a difference, in all honesty. They're seeing the actual Lewis drivers and bus air and all striking and getting rewarded money. And now the Gardaí are saying the same thing. They want to get, obviously, a pay rise and get money because they can't survive. Well, the people on the street can't get a pay rise and we can't survive, but yet you're arresting people because they can't afford to pay things and you're giving out about it, but on one hand they're giving out, on the other hand they're arresting people because they can't afford it. I mean, it's just unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah. It really is unbelievable.
And actually those Lewis drivers, that was brought to my attention recently, do you know how much they're on per year?
Go on.
They're on over 40 grand per year.
Right, just to go forward and backward.
Yes.
Right.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take that job. I can do that. I could do that in my sleep. And the last thing on the list, before we go over to Alan and Steve's week, is that we are having a meeting this week. Things are moving on slowly regarding Kells Community Radio. So the good news is we're having a meeting this week, another meeting, which is great to see, and we're getting everybody together and we're going to have a brainstorming session, and a few people have a few things to do. They've all been allocated little jobs to do. We all have our little bits to do. So we're going to get together on Tuesday and update everybody what's been going on. And slowly but surely we'll try and move forward with this. Now the biggest problem that we have is getting a location for the community radio show, the community radio station, and that's being looked into as well. And if we have any information for you, we'll keep you posted, because we're hoping to move the show over to Kells Community Radio, and we're kind of helping out there. And even if we get things up on a temporary basis to get things running, that's the plan, and then just build it up from there. So that's we'll keep you posted on that anyway. And as we say, an orchard of 1,000 trees has to be started by the planting of the first tree. So it's small steps, but we'll see where we go from there. How's your week, Steve?
Yeah, my week's been quite interesting, just in the usual sort of way. Everything that's going on in the news, and just kind of in my place of employment, we just we talk about kind of what's going on in the news, and I generally throw in comments as the alternative media, if you like, or the local conspiracy theorists, whatever way I'm referred to. But yeah, it's just the usual kind of mix there. Nothing much going on really. Hillary Clinton, we've seen a lot of information about her during the week, that she has body doubles and all this carry on. I floated that with them in work, and they're still looking at me like I've got two heads, but that's okay. I don't mind. I'd rather have two heads, because two heads hopefully means two brains. Some of the people I work with, you wonder if there's even one brain cell in there. What else have we got? The Aurora Borealis, or Northern Lights for ye common people. I'm just joking. We were told that was going to be that phenomenon. The Aurora Borealis was going to be making an appearance this weekend, Friday night and Saturday night. And unfortunately, Ireland being Ireland, the skies were overcast, and there was a spot of rain as well, so we didn't get to see it. And I don't believe it actually happened, to be totally honest, because it normally interferes with radio communications, and we're kind of big fans of radio communications, and there was nothing spectacular at all, but you couldn't see it anyway with the grey skies. But yeah, maybe we look forward to the next one. And just one more thing I want to say. From a personal point of view and perspective, and I just mentioned this to Alan before the show, the time has come, and I'm sure it's come to many. Alan doesn't know what I'm going to say here, do you? He's wondering what I'm going to say. It's finally happened. Yes, I finally got to meet my daughter's boyfriend.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun is right, yeah. And we were just saying before the show that, both of us are obviously fathers, we're dads. And, when we kind of start going around and having relationships with members of the opposite sex, our fathers would have been of a certain age, and we're now that certain age, and we don't feel that way. We don't feel that old. And I felt my age yesterday when the boyfriend came in and was introduced to me, and shook my hand and told me who he was, and I just sat there. I just sat there, and I felt so old. So yeah, if anyone on the chat room has any information, or even a good book on the subject, or a YouTube video that will get me through these hard times of feeling old, that will be much appreciated. Anyway, there we go, tongue in cheek. How's your week?
I'll be doing the same thing.
You will.
My son is at that age when, it'll be that, and I'll be meeting the girlfriend and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, God, it makes you feel old. Anyway, right, okay, during the week, there's been loads of financial experts saying that the collapse is coming. And, we all know they've been saying this for years. They've been saying it for an awful long time. And of course it's going to come. Like Christmas, of course it's going to, guaranteed it's going to come. But, and it will come eventually, but it just seems that the scaremongering's gone around all the time. Now, I did say earlier on, we all know about, hopefully we all know about Deutsche Bank and what's happening over there. I would also keep an eye on Citibank in America, and I'd keep an eye on Barclays Bank in London. But Deutsche Bank, the hedge fund people are taking out they're losing confidence with Deutsche Bank, and they're taking out the money and reallocating it. And apparently Dabu7, who's a YouTuber, was talking about the ATMs not giving out money, and when people rang up Deutsche Bank, they said, "Oh, it's just a glitch. We'll get back to you on that." That's always a bad sign, because the last thing a bank would want is a run on the banking system, because obviously that means people taking out all the money all at the same time, and they don't like that, and they don't have the money to support it. Now, we did see that in Greece. It happened for a week in Greece, so there's no reason why the bail-in might happen, because if Deutsche Bank goes down, because you have to remember that the DOJ, which is the Department of Justice, is fining Deutsche Bank for certain things they did that caused the actual crash in 2008. and you want 14 billion, and Deutsche Bank are going, well, no, we can't give you 14 billion, we'll give you 5 billion. But even 5 billion will be have a massive effect on the actual bank, and there'll be jobs going, and it's going to be a domino effect. So if it does happen to go down Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we have to keep an eye on things. All the banks are going to feel it. All the banks are going to feel it, because we were told before by Lindsay Williams about the derivatives market, and that's in the quadrillions at the moment, and that's just betting on the future. Things that haven't happened. It's the futures market, and that's the first thing to go, and then when that goes, everything else has a knock-on effect. And we are talking about the fractional reserve banking system, and it is a Ponzi scheme, like it's a pyramid scheme. It's going to fall. Now, they're saying that derivatives market at the moment is worth 2 quadrillion, which is 22 times all global GDP combined. I mean, that is phenomenal. Really is phenomenal. So I would just be watching that very carefully. Don't mind what the propaganda says on the mainstream media, because we'll just have to see what happens with that. But I'll keep an eye on that. Anyway, now the other thing is there's a TV program out there called Gogglebox. I'm sure you've all seen it, where people are all sitting around watching TV programs, and you're watching them watching the TV program. And I mean, if you think about it, that's a fantastic way for the powers to be to monitor the programming, to see is the programming working on the sheeple. So they put a camera in your house, and they monitor you watching the TV and their programs to see is the programming working. I mean, God forbid if I had one of them cameras, and well, I don't watch TV, but if I did watch TV, I'd be saying quite a lot actually. So if you think about it, now they had Big Brother. So they had the psychology with Big Brother, and now they have this program called Hunted, where they're hunting people down, and now they've made it into some kind of game show. It's unbelievable what they're doing. Really is unbelievable what they're doing. So, you know, at the end of the day,
I just wonder, are we going to mention that as well?
Do you want to mention it?
Yeah, just very quickly. Something that we heard of during the week. Now, it wasn't on the agenda, but I'm just going to throw it in very quickly. If we do have any listeners tuned in this evening, or maybe listening to the podcast in Northern Ireland, if you heard of anything, a crash during the week, maybe you could just do a little bit of reconnaissance and just send us whatever information you can. We're just trying to piece this one together. We got some information during the week from a listener, one of our listeners. And she basically told us that some class of a craft had crashed in Northern Ireland, and that very, very quickly all communication was cut off in the area, mobile communication, and the police moved in, and something was taken away under a big tarp cloth. Now, we don't know what exactly happened, but Miles Johnson was on Facebook there this morning. He's actually in the UK at a convention, but he took some time out this morning just to reiterate that as well. He's putting the call out as well for anyone who may be up there who knows anything. He said that there was reports of a triangular-shaped craft seen in the sky. Now, was there? I don't know. We haven't heard. But if anyone is in Northern Ireland and you do have any information, please fire it off to us. Thanks for that.
Now, I have a relative up there, and it's only down the road from where she is, and she said she heard nothing.
Yeah, nothing?
Yeah, nothing at all. So she's, I said, well, keep the ear to the ground and let us know if you hear anything. Right, before we bring our guest in, Steve's going to give us a quick bio of Dr. Guy McPherson.
Okay, Dr. Guy McPherson is a professor emeritus of conservation biology at the University of Arizona. He is the leading voice on the topic of abrupt climate change leading to near-term human extinction. His classrooms were under surveillance by the US government no later than 2005. He has been labelled an anarchist and eco-terrorist by senior members of the Obama administration. He readily pleads guilty to the former and probably also to the latter, depending upon how it is defined.
Excellent. Good evening, Guy. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. I enjoyed the opportunity to be on the show with you today, so thanks for that.
Great. Thanks a lot for coming on. Much appreciated. We did get a message from Dr. Carol Rosen, because you were on her show recently, and she did say that Guy would be a great guest to get on to talk about this human extinction and where we're going if we don't change what we're doing on the planet and to ourselves. So, is there anything on the bio that you want to add before we get into what you're what your research has came up with.
No, you guys are doing great, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with Carol on her show a couple of times recently. And I just need to point out that I'm a conservation biologist. So for a very long time, I've been studying habitat and extinction and speciation of other species. So this is just an extension of my work to the human animal.
Okay. Now, obviously, a lot of people should be aware, if you're not aware by now, everybody should be aware, that the resources on the planet are not finite. And them trucks that are turning up to Tesco's or Walmart every day with goods, I mean, eventually that's going to stop happening because we cannot keep doing what we're doing to the planet. They're going to run out. Now, a movie that we talk about on a regular basis, and we were told this by, we call him a super soldier he probably doesn't like that, but he's a chap that was highly trained in the military called John Irwin, and he keeps mentioning a movie called Silent Green with Charlton Heston. And he said, this is the way things are going to go, where what you're eating is not food. And we're already starting to see that. We're processed food, with all the chemicals, all the substitutes that are being put in there to make it, taste nice, and to make it like food, when it's really not food. We've heard, did you come across cheese one time that was like imitation cheese, or was plastic in it or something?
That's correct, yeah. That was recently on a trip to Galway.
Right.
There was this plastic-looking stuff, and it had all these different chemicals making up the ingredients, and they had cheese flavour added. So, I mean, obviously, if there was no cheese flavour, God knows what it would have tasted like.
God, terrible. So, do you want to give us your take on where you see us at the moment in 2016 and the planet, and what's happening and what we can start doing about it?
Well, it's obvious that we're in the midst of abrupt climate change. This is a phenomenon with historical precedents in Earth's history, not in human history, because we just showed up a relatively short while ago. But abrupt climate change was a completely different thing than the sort of Al Gore, inconvenient truth, linear climate change that most of us are familiar with. That version focuses on carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. At this point, we have every reason to be very concerned, not only about carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And I remember when 350.org was formed, and the big mission was to get down below 350 parts per million, inspired by James Hansen's work. But James Hansen actually said that 300 parts per million was probably a more reasonable target. And now we're at 400, and nobody on Earth right now will ever experience anything less than 400 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And we've also got a bunch of methane up there in the atmosphere. And there's a handful of other greenhouse gases as well, chlorofluorocarbons, ozone, and so on. So, it's not just that we are not turning this ship around. It's that we are pedal to the metal, trying to make the ship go as fast as we can, and it's been going down for a while. So I'd say at this point in planetary history, the human species is in serious trouble. It was late June 1989 that Noah Brown, the lead official for the New York office of the United Nations Environment Program, said that we have about 10 years to fix the carbon dioxide problem, to fix climate change, or the thing is going to spin out of human control. Well, that means somewhere around June of 1999, things spun out of human hands, spun out of our ability to control it. That was, if I'm doing the math, that was a little over 17 years ago. So I would say at this point it's reasonable to conclude that the situation has spun out of human hands, it's spun out of human control, and that we are facing extremely dire straits in the not-too-distant future.
Now, a couple of years ago, the French foreign minister turned around with John Kerry, and he announced that we had 500 days to avoid climate chaos. Have you seen that clip, and do you know what he was referring to?
Yeah, I have seen the clip, and I suspect he was referring to methane in the atmosphere being clearly triggered at an exponential rate instead of just bubbling along, so to speak. with a relatively small amount of methane in the atmosphere. And bear in mind that at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, about 1750, there were about 750 parts per billion methane in the atmosphere. And now there's about 2,000 parts per billion in the atmosphere. So I suspect he was talking about it becoming apparent that methane release into the atmosphere had gone exponential. That 500 days, if I recall correctly, ended last year about this time. So it's behind us.
Okay, so we have surpassed that date. Does that mean that we are actually going downhill now at the moment, picking up speed, and there's very little that we can do about it at the moment?
That's absolutely right. We are going downhill. We are picking up speed. We are stomping on the accelerator. The faster we go, the more ground we cover. Not only that, but we're picking up weight along the way. And so it's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. We have become the torpedo aimed at our own heads, the Gatling gun aimed at the human species. So it's pretty evident that we have passed the proverbial tipping point. In fact, more than 6 of those tipping points. And that now the situation is truly out of our hand. In fact, if we ceased all industrial activity right now, right in the middle of this radio show, if we ceased industrial activity right now, the amount of global dimming that would be lost by stopping putting the particulates up into the atmosphere, most notably things like sulfates. Those aerosols constantly fall out of the sky. In somewhere around 3 days to 3 weeks, the planet would warm up quite catastrophically, would warm up about 3 degrees Celsius above where we're at now in a very, very short period of time.
Okay, I know this as well, and I don't know whether you did wanted to exclude it, but we've also been informed about the dangerous radiation levels that are being found across Europe and obviously globally as well. Have you come across that?
Yes, absolutely. And shortly after Fukushima's catastrophe, the United States government stopped releasing the data to the populace that they were collecting, most notably upon the west coast of the United States. And before then, when measurements were still allowed to be collected and reported, it was pretty evident that things had gone seriously south. So it's pretty obvious that we're dealing not only with one particular catastrophe, but that we're in the midst of a perfect storm of multiple interacting catastrophes, from ionizing radiation spewing all over the globe to abrupt climate change to depletion of what we tend to think of as our God-given right, those resources like oil and gas and so on. So we have all of this going on at the same time. Meanwhile, we're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, the 6th major extinction event on planet Earth. And according to the senior author of the paper in Science Advances, reporting on the 6th great extinction, which came out in 2015, the senior author, Gerardo Ceballos, said that our species would likely be among the first to go in this mass extinction event. So we have all kinds of phenomena going on right now that point to nothing but bad news for our favorite species. And they all interact with each other. You know, there's the 6th mass extinction, ionizing radiation, abrupt climate change, on and on. The spoiling of the air and fouling of the water, and on the list goes. None of it looks good to me. I don't see any attribute of industrial civilization that is actually making for more habitat for our species on the planet, much less the other species that we depend upon for our own existence. So, at this point, I would say to call things dire would be the understatement of the year, at least.
Obviously you're aware of chemtrails, and you've seen them, I'm sure. What's your take on what they are and what they're doing?
I have no take on what they are and what they're doing. It is, I can only focus my efforts on so many things at a time, and for me, that's beyond my area of expertise or particular interest. I mean, at some level, I could spend all my life focusing on all the myriad events that are leading to our demise. But I've got to draw the line somewhere and focus on what I think I'm relatively good at. And for me, that's abrupt climate change and impacts on habitat. So I don't study ionizing radiation. I don't study a whole bunch of other things. And that's by design, because there's only one of me and I don't get paid to do any of this. So I'm just trying to keep it as simple as I can.
Okay, well that's okay, because the reason why I ask obviously is because we've obviously looked into this. We've had people on the show to talk about it, but the strontium, barium, aluminium that's coming from these chemtrails rather than contrails. And we've pilots on the show talking about it and everything else. And there is mention of some kind of terraforming going on the planet. Do you think it's just climate change and it's just we're polluting the planet, or do you think there's something more sinister to it?
I think there's, every civilization, including this one, the most recent example of civilization, industrial civilization, every civilization has been characterized by a series of factors, and they've never been more evident than with this particular civilization. Let me give a few examples. Endemic poverty resulting from monetary disparity. That's an attribute of every civilization so far. It's never been greater than with this civilization. Endemic racism, endemic misogyny, endemic trashing of the planet, accelerated erosion rates. So all of these things are related. Every civilization thinks that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet. An idea that, of course, once you put it that way, it's absurd. And the greatest measure of success for every civilization is more, just more of everything. Well, obviously, that doesn't work. It can't work. And when you put it in simple terms like that, it makes perfect sense why it can't work, and that it's got to come down. As you said at the top of the show, civilization has to end. Well, when it does in this case, we're going to experience extremely abrupt heating of the planet that it's difficult for me to imagine complex organisms will survive. And if we don't turn off civilization, if we don't turn off the heat engine that is civilization, then it continues to heat the planet. And that's been well documented, particularly by the work of Tim Garrett, atmospheric scientist at the University of Utah, who began writing his papers on the topic of civilization as a heat engine about a decade ago. And it took about 5 years, nearly 5 years, to get his first paper published on the topic, because nobody wants to know that the civilization many of us hold so dear and so love because it rewards us. We don't want to know that has a downside. And that downside includes not only heating, but all those other things I already mentioned, like racism and monetary disparity, and on the list goes. If you're looking for anything that could possibly go wrong, you can probably find it with a relatively quick online search. And the root of each of those predicaments is the same. It's civilization. And in this case, it's industrial civilization. So we have this version of civilization has indeed done a serious number on the planet from every possible angle. Mike Tyson, the boxer, likes to say everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it looks like we've punched the planet in the face repeatedly, and stopping punching the planet in the face at this point is too little, too late. We've basically killed the planet. But
surely the likes of the politicians and the environmentalists and stuff like that surely they know, the industrialists. They know what they're doing. They're destroying the planet, and it's not going to benefit them either. So, nobody's going to benefit from this. So surely they need to wise up and realize it. Why aren't they doing that?
That's a great question. They have to know. Of course they have to know. You think that the leaders of the big nations, the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of the United States, and on, you think they don't know what I know? Of course they do. They have hundreds of people working at their disposal for the intelligence gathering organizations. Of course they know what I do. So I suspect they're, to quote Van Jones, President Obama's green job czar, for about 20 minutes until he offended somebody. at the relatively high levels. I'm going to quote him. He said that the people we think are in charge really aren't in charge. They don't know what to do. That's a direct quote from him in September 2007. He said, they don't know what to do, so they're juggling chickens and chainsaws, another direct quote, to keep the system going for another day. It's out of their hands too, but they're just trying to continue to confuse the masses, continue to keep the balls in the air, the plates spinning, whatever analogy you want to use, because it benefits them. They benefit greatly from this set of living arrangements. They don't want it to go away, and they know when it goes away that we all go away, that extinction follows not too far behind that. So, of course they want to keep it going as long as possible. Of course, there's a conservation biologist named Paul Ehrlich at Stanford University. I was talking with him a year or two ago, and he says, I'm going to paraphrase here, if the Titanic is going down, you don't want to be in steerage. And so you want to be in those good decks, the berths that have the good views and so on. You don't want to be down in steerage where you can't even tell what's going on. It's too hot. It's too cold, depending upon the time of the day and the time of the year. So I think that's the mentality of the people pulling the strings of empire. Is the ship is going down. It's been going down for a while. They recognize that the ship is going down, and they don't want to be in steerage. They want to make sure that they are able to enjoy their days until their final days, until their final hours. And when you look at it like that, it's hard to blame them. If everybody is headed for the same toilet in the not too distant future, then I suspect most people want to be in a good spot so that they get to the toilet last, and along the way they don't have to smell as much stink as everybody else does.
Well, I mean, we do know, and this is fact rather than conspiracy, that there is 129 underground bases in the States alone, and I'm sure they're all around the world. And, you don't have to go far to go and see these bases. I mean, they're very blasé about, people knowing about it, and the Ozarks being one place. Maybe they have the Willy Wonka, golden ticket, that they can disappear on the ground for a period of time, maybe indefinitely, or for at least 5 to 10 years until things sort themselves out. And maybe that's why they're not too concerned about it.
Well, it might be, but what's going to await them when they come back up? I suspect in the very near future we're headed for global average temperature of what this Earth experienced when there were dinosaurs on the planet. During the great dying of 252 million years ago, the temperature rose to 23 degrees Celsius. It looks like we're headed for that global average temperature as well in the very near future, or at least temperature very close to that. And no complex organisms are going to survive. So you can go down in your bunker and you can hang out for 5 years or 10 years, but then when you come back up, it's going to be a moonscape. It's going to be a wasteland. It's going to be way too hot to support any complex life. Is that living, or is that dying a little more slowly? From my perspective, hanging out in your bunker for 5 or 10 years with the kind of people who drove us to the abyss, which means people that I wouldn't really like to spend my time with, and then coming up above and finding that it's a nuclear detonation wasteland with 400 some Fukushimas going off at the same time. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. So what I try to do, and what I encourage other people to do with the limited voice that I have, is live your life and try to pursue excellence in your life, which is something Socrates pointed out as a pretty good idea some 2,600 years ago. And I don't think that's bad advice no matter how long we have. And it certainly makes a lot more sense to me than trying to beat the house at its own poker game, which ultimately is leading to no habitat for humans. And probably that will persist for millions of years, not years, not tens of years, but millions of years. And that's been the case with past rises in global average temperature leading to mass extinction events on planet Earth.
Okay, a while ago you had Al Gore gone around doing a talk about climate change. What's your take on Al Gore and what he was going around doing the presentations? What's your take on his information?
Well, a couple of things. Al Gore got a lot of resistance because he was doing a couple of things. He was going around telling us the dangers of anthropogenic or human-caused climate change. I think he was largely right about that, and that the data and evidence have supported the notion that what he was speaking was actually strongly based in evidence. The resistance he got, though, was from the way he lived, which seemed in contrast to what he was asking people to do. So yes, he put a bunch of solar panels on a house, but he also continued to participate in the kinds of activities that he was asking other people to not participate in. Reducing their driving, improving their gas mileage, not taking so many flights, and living a little bit more simply on the planet. So I think he had the message right. I think he had the evidence and the data pretty much right on. And as with almost anybody who's promulgating a message that is pretty unpopular, it was pointed out that he wasn't exactly walking the walk as he was asking other people to do. And so he got a lot of resistance for that. And in my mind, that's whatever. That's kill the messenger instead of focusing on the message. And at this point, we are so far beyond that simple linear climate change and into the arena of abrupt climate change that it appears at this point that the situation is well out of human hands. Just as Noel Brown with the United Nations Environment Program in New York pointed out in 1989 would happen in a decade. Yeah, it looks like even if we cease all industrial activity at this point, we're screwed regardless. And so, the message of mine is that we don't have long, even if we live to be 100 or so. I don't think most people would consider at the end of their lives that was a very long time. I think Al Gore pretty much had it right, and that he, in acting as a lightning rod for an unpopular message, he took a lot of hits for it. And for the most part, I think that was in the category of kill the messenger instead of focusing on the message. So that's simplifying a bit, but I'm going to stick with that for now.
Well, you were right there. We've had the same hypocrisy over here, where they're flying around in the private jets or whatever, saying you have to reduce their carbon footprint, while they're flying around in their jets and their big cars and their gas guzzlers and everything else. And, I am a big believer of leading by example, as much as you can, depending on circumstances, but they don't need to fly. Oh, bit noisy there. They don't need to fly in their private jets to do seminars. I mean, that's why we have technology and Skype and things like that to do it. If they need to be there, I'm sure they'd find a better way to do it rather than using private jets to do it. But it's when the government start dictating to you what you should be doing about changing your light bulbs and changing X, Y, and Z, but they're doing the opposite. That's when people kind of switch off, and that hypocrisy in Ireland is something that we're very well used to with the government, the dictatorship that we have over here anyway. But I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve has a few questions that have come in from our chat room, so we'll pass you over there, Steve.
Yeah, the first question we have in, I suppose, came in there a while ago, Guy, from Chris. And Chris says, can you ask Guy, is climate change not normal? He says, we have ice ages and warm periods all throughout history.
Yeah, that's a good question. I get that question a lot. First, I want to address the previous point regarding hypocrisy. And there's no question that makes selling a message or getting a word out far more difficult than it would otherwise be. My co-host on my own radio show, Nature Bats Last on the Progressive Radio Network, my co-host tonight, Mike Sleva, did an entire show focused on celebrity culture and so people look towards Leonardo DiCaprio, for example, as some sort of climate hero. And meanwhile, he spends millions of dollars and takes an entire group of people to shoot the glacier as it disappears, to point out to people that this glacier is disappearing because of people like him flying around and documenting the event. So, of course, it's ludicrous. Okay, on to the question from Chris, which I appreciate. Yes, there have been climate changes in the past, and most notably, the temperature of the Earth during the last 2 billion years, that's 2,000 million, has stabilized at either ice age, about 12 degrees Celsius, or hothouse, about 22 degrees Celsius. That's the global average temperature. And there have been once or twice in the last 2 billion years where the temperature has gone up to 23 degrees Celsius. And there have been very, very few and very transient temperature in between those points, between 12 and 22. The temperature rises and the temperature falls from ice age to hothouse and from hothouse back down to ice age respectively have occurred relatively quickly over a span of thousands of years or sometimes tens of thousands of years, but pretty quickly. What we have done, and here I'm talking about civilized human beings, what we have done as civilization is greatly accelerate the transition from ice age, which is where we were, 12 to 18,000 years ago, and hothouse. So we're going from ice age to hothouse in a pretty abrupt period of time. Civilizations arose on the planet, half a dozen or so of them, pretty much at the same time, a few thousand years ago. And coincident with those civilizations appearing, we started warming the Earth, and we really started warming the Earth at two signature events, about 1750 when we started burning fossil fuels at scale, and more recently, since about 2007 or so, when we entered the arena of abrupt climate change, when we really started to force the skyrocketing of the global average temperature. So yes, there is planetary precedence for what we have done so far. It's important to realize, however, that the temperature rises in the past coming out of ice ages have been preceded by carbon dioxide released by the ocean. In this case, we have released the carbon dioxide by burning fuel, by all aspects of industrialization, such as the internal combustion engine and turning the lights on, keeping the coal going, and so on. So we've accelerated that transition out of the ice age to a hothouse Earth, and it's occurring at far, far faster speed than organisms are able to keep up, most notably including complex organisms that depend upon food and water that we get from so many other species that pollinate our food and so on. So, yes, there's plenty of evidence in the past, in Earth's history, for relatively abrupt changes in global average temperature. What we're seeing this time is the triggering of that transition as a result of industrial activities, and the transition occurring far faster than it has in the last 2 billion years at least. So this is a big one. We are in fact responsible for it, and we will be paying the price.
What happens though, Guy? I mean, let's say for argument's sake, if we do stop what we're doing and we make change, we respect the planet, and we think we're making progress. But let's just say, I mean, imagine for a second, like if this was a natural part of history or a natural part of the cycle, and it was meant to be. I mean, there's no guarantee though, if we stop doing what we're doing, that everything's going to return to normal. Is there?
Oh no, absolutely not. In fact, because industrial activity produces particulates that we put up into the atmosphere, some of which serve as a reflective umbrella-like shield over the planet. Because we're doing that at the same time we're adding these greenhouse gases, which act as a blanket to hold the heat down. We're doing two things at once. Most people have focused on the carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that serve to hold the heat down, and that was Al Gore's approach. What we didn't know until quite recently, in the referred journal literature, quite recently, we discovered that in addition to those particles that hold the heat down, we're also producing an umbrella effect with particles, most notably sulfates, and most of those come from burning, quote, low quality or poor quality coal. Well, they serve as an umbrella So if we stop all industrial activity right now, then in a very short period of time, all those particulates, most notably the sulfates, are going to fall out of the atmosphere. They're all falling out all the time. It's only because we add more every day than are falling out every day that we keep the umbrella intact. If they all fall out because we cease industrial activity or we switch to solar panels and wind turbines and so on, then we'll experience a very, very abrupt heating of the planet that I doubt any human being can possibly survive. That'll take us up to 4.5 degrees Celsius above baseline in a matter of weeks. So I don't see us as complex organisms surviving that. So we're really in this position of being damned if you do and damned if you don't. If we keep the heat engine going, we continue to warm the planet. If we turn off the heat engine, we very, very, very rapidly warm the planet. So, pick your poison, but recognize that the poison has arrived and it's sitting there in front of us, and we're making a decision every day to pick one poison or another, but it's all lethal.
Yeah, and again, I know Alan mentioned about chemtrails to you earlier, and you said you hadn't looked into that, but a lot of people are saying, people who are studying this, they're saying that a lot of what's coming out of the back of these airplanes that are leaving trails across the sky like a checkerboard, and then they're filling the whole sky into this milky haze. They're saying that what's being sprayed up there is barium, strontium, and aluminium. And some people are saying what that is for is to, like what you're saying about these particles, to reflect the radiation and the heat from the sun back off the earth and into the atmosphere. And that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin are saying that when they put these things up in the atmosphere, okay, it probably will do that, but you are going to have these particles that are going to fall to earth. And if you have a lot of soil and all of a sudden you have a lot of aluminium going into soil, it's going to contaminate the soil. Seeds won't grow. And now you're faced with a different problem altogether.
Right. If that's true, if there are all these particulates that are purposely put into the atmosphere and they have these consequences, then it's just another example of damned if you do and damned if you don't. So we turn it off and we get this abrupt heating because of the lack of reflection of the sun's rays back into space. And if we don't turn it off, then we keep heating the planet. So, there's no way out on this one.
Again,
as it turns out, birth is a sexually transmitted disease that ends up being lethal in every case.
As you said, you take your poison or select your poison, because if the particles go down to the soil and they start affecting the pH of the soil, which is what's being reported is happening, then the quality of the soil is not going to be good enough to grow the food. The other thing I was going to mention about the chemtrails, the whole heating up, this greenhouse effect, and the status of the ozone at the moment. What are they reporting back? Do you have any information regarding that?
Well, the atmospheric ozone is thinning, and probably, again, that results from industrial activity. And as a consequence, the sun's rays feel hotter on your skin than they used to, because the ozone is thinning all around the planet. And when I'm on tour, people tell me that all the time. They pick me up in their car and they say, I've noticed within the last year, last summer, or this summer, or whatever, that the sun's rays are actually hotter. Why would they feel hotter than they used to? And that's because we're losing the protective ozone, because it gets locked up by the particulates we put up there through industrial activity. So there's all kinds of signs of rapid changes in the environment that keeps us alive. And as nearly as I can tell, every one of those changes is pointing in the wrong direction. Every one of those changes is leading to our demise and not making things better.
Okay, with the amount of weather conditions that we're having more activity on the planet globally regarding volcanoes, tsunamis, flooding, our tropical storms. A couple of weeks ago, I went on the weather website and there was 8 tropical storms in one particular time in that week. Is this anything got to do with the global change, the effects that are taking place, or is this just something else?
No. This is absolutely a result, and has long been predicted by climate scientists to be a result of heating of the planet. And the simplest way of looking at those storms is the ocean warms and acts as a battery. The ocean holds a lot of heat and it holds a lot of carbon dioxide. And when that heat is released from the ocean, the quick way to release that heat is to create a storm. And the superstorms are getting bigger every year. It wasn't that long ago that an event like Katrina, for example, was a big, big deal. And it was unprecedented. And now Katrina doesn't seem like that big a deal when we got Sandy and Haiyan and Winston happening pretty much every year. So now, because there's so much heat stored in the ocean, and because that heat has to come out for the planet to enter an equilibrium state, one of the consequences of that is these superstorms, the likes of which we've never seen before. And the only thing I can promise about those is that they're going to get worse. The storms are going to get bigger because the carbon dioxide and the heat continue to be stored in the ocean, and the planet is trying to achieve equilibrium through simple physics and chemistry. And the consequence of that is that those superstorms are really just getting started at about 1.8 degrees Celsius above the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Can you imagine what they're going to look like when we're at 4 or 4.5 or 5 or 8 degrees Celsius above baseline, which is where we're headed in the very near future? That's going to be absolutely staggering, the consequences for the environment on this planet.
Okay, I think people need to build their underground bases, but I don't think they're going to have much luck even if they do, because the survival on the planet is going to be very difficult. Steve, you got more questions there for Guy?
Yeah, we have a question. Well, it's Thomas and Dougie both have a similar question, so I'll just ask both of them. Thomas is wondering, if we all go vegan, will that save the planet? And Dougie says, animals produce a lot of methane. Is us being veggies/vegans the answer?
It is an answer depending upon your own individual situation. Lots of people feel a lot better by reducing emissions by eating lower on the food chain. And industrial livestock growing, notably, note there, industrial livestock growing, produces about 30% of the methane and about 30% of the greenhouse gases released on the planet. Will that solve the issue of abrupt climate change and human extinction? No. Will it make you feel better about your impact on the planet and your responsibility? Probably so. Just as by driving less and bicycling more, and whatever your version of a pursuit of excellence is, you can work on that in any number of ways. Are you contributing to the demise of the planet less by eating vegan? Everything else held the same? Yes. And the same can be said for moving out of cities and growing a bunch of your own food. The same can be said about reducing your carbon and, at a larger scale, your environmental footprint any number of ways. But to think that we can recycle our way out of this, or change our diet to solve the problem, or switch to squirrely light bulbs, all of that, it falls into the category, I think, of bargaining, of stage 3 of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. After denial and anger comes bargaining, and if we just negotiate, well, you can't negotiate with Mother Earth. We've punched the planet in the face way too many times to think that an apology for punching the planet in the face is going to solve the problem. And most of those so-called solutions fall into the category of apology. We punch the planet in the face by 90% of our activities on a daily basis, and then we eat vegan, so that's going to fix it. Or we put solar panels on our house, so that's going to fix it. Or we take the bus instead of taking the car, and that's going to fix it. And of course, that's not going to fix it. We're beyond the point of fixing this thing, and there's 7.4 billion of us, and headed for 7.5 billion in the very, very near future, and then 8 billion, and so on. And there's essentially no chance of getting everybody on board the vegan train and the squirrely light bulb train and the electric car train and the million other things we need to do to even stop increasing the amount of greenhouses we put into the atmosphere, never mind dragging them back down, a phenomenon for which there is no known technology.
Well, it definitely does. Unfortunately, it does kind of sound like we are damned if we do and damned if we don't. So, as Alan said to you before we went live, normally what we do is we kind of address the problem, we kind of trash it out, we look at it from different angles, and then we kind of look to see if there are any solutions. But the information that's coming back sounds kind of like that no matter what we do, it won't be enough, because seemingly we've done too much damage in a short period of time, and it's irreversible, if what I'm hearing you say is correct.
We've gone over the hill, and basically we're on the way down. And where we should have stopped at the top of the hill, we didn't. We carried on, and we're gaining momentum. So, I think the end of the world party is going to have to be in Guy's house.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I have room for a not quite 7.4 billion, but room for a few anyway.
Good. Okay, we'll bring a bottle. You'll have to bring a bottle. All right. So.
Yes, Irish people especially welcome.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. That's a good sign. Okay, we'll have to put the message out there. Don't be surprised if you have half a dozen turn up tonight now after the show. They'll track you down, especially if there's a free party going, As Steve said, we do try and look for solutions, and something that we have been playing around with is solar technology, and we're kind of getting into that and understanding about our footprint as much as we can, and growing our own food and everything else. But as Steve said, there doesn't seem to be a solution to this unless something drastic happens or a change takes place. Because I know this is kind of one take on things, and I know you said earlier that you only focus on certain areas and you're not really interested in certain, you only do so much, and that's understandable. As radio show hosts, we do talk to an awful lot of people on our show, and they have their own take on things and what's going on and what's happening. And we've noticed recently, from a scientific point of view, that the likes of NASA have been coming out very frequently now talking about new inhabitable planets that have water on them. Europa being the moon that could be a potential, and certain, other celestial bodies that they're finding all of a sudden that could be in the Goldilocks zone that we could actually inhabit. And this tends to be, over the last few weeks, the last few months, this has been creeping in bit by bit. More and more information has been coming out of this, and announcements being made. And we were told that there will be an awful lot, there will be an escalation of information over the next few months of things that are coming out and happening. So maybe there is a plan B. Now, I'm not saying they're going to pick up 7 billion people and put them on a different planet, because we've knackered this one. But maybe there is something in the pipeline somewhere, or maybe there's advanced technology which we're not aware of, which we know they have, that could make a difference and make a change and reverse some of the issues that we're suffering from.
I'd be a huge fan. Don't get me wrong, just because I think the data, the evidence points towards human extinction in the near term as a result of abrupt climate change. That doesn't mean I think that's a good idea. And I made all the changes that I thought would fix it. I left active service at the university, at a major Southwestern university, more than 7 years ago. I moved to a homestead. I created the homestead. I started growing all my own food. Within a couple of years, I was able to do that. I built greenhouses and root cellars and started living simply. And I thought, as a professor of all things, as a teacher, and much less a middle-aged white man, I figured that pretty much everybody on the planet would follow me and start doing what I was doing. It turned out I was mistaken about that. It wasn't the first mistake I'd made, and certainly not the last. And as it turns out, even that off-grid house I built, an incredibly well-insulated straw bale house with solar panels on it and blah, 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 all that still isn't going to save me. So I'm in the position of being the last person you would expect to conclude that we're headed for our own demise. I should be promoting all the things that I have done and try to get everybody on board with me. That's what teachers do, after all, and I'm a teacher. But I came to recognize that it's too late for all that to work, that like everybody else on the planet, I'm going to die too. It's kind of a bummer, but I think that that's the case based on the evidence. And so I don't think we can turn this ship around. That said, I do have solutions if you'd like to hear them.
Of course. Shoot away.
Okay, I have 3 solutions. They only apply at the level of individual, maybe in your family, your small group. First, number 1, remain calm. Nothing is under control. Nothing has ever been under our individual control. And I still don't think that means we should freak out about whatever is coming. You knew since you were probably 11 years old that you were going to die. And I'm just suggesting that it might be faster than expected, that you and everybody around you is going to lose habitat and is going to die. But at some level, you already knew that part. So 1, remain calm. Nothing is under control. 2, pursue excellence. And I would argue that even if I'm wrong, even if all the evidence I point to is incorrect, even if all these climate scientists are paid off by the industrialists to tell people that climate change is bad, even if all that is wrong, that still pursuing a life of excellence, whatever that means to you, can never be a bad idea. In a culture of mediocrity, in a culture where we're actually generally promoted and encouraged to pursue mediocrity, I think the pursuit of excellence, consistent with Socrates' message from 2,600 years ago, is not such a bad idea after all. And number 3, do what you love and love what you do. If you pursue excellence, you can also pursue love, whatever that means to you. Again, whatever and whoever that means to you. And again, if I'm wrong, if all the data and all the evidence I point to is wrong, even if we get to live to be 100 or 150 or forever, even if we get to live forever, then remaining calm, pursuing excellence, and doing what we love, I don't think any of those is a bad idea. So that's what I suggest in my way of solutions. And I'm not saying that they will solve the predicaments we face, but they might make life a little bit better and a little bit more worth living.
Yeah. Well, as I said at the start of the show when we start talking about this, it's very obvious to me, and I'm sure that it's very obvious to a lot of people, that the delivery truck of Tesco's and Walmart and all these, it's finite. We only have a certain amount of resources on the planet. And we are destroying the planet at the moment. And, like the Amazon jungle, I mean, how many thousands of acres are being destroyed on a daily basis to supply us with this consumerism, for the mobile phones we want and everything else. Maybe we have to kick back to a more simplistic way of life, and maybe that's what's going to happen, because if we do have something like, it was on Friday, the mainstream media over here in Ireland, the Daily Express newspaper, was talking about Steve mentioned earlier, the Aurora Borealis, that was supposed to happen on Friday evening over here. And in Iceland, they were going to knock off all the streetlights so everybody could see it. Now, we've talked before about coronal mass ejections, and we are, due for a big hit. We know about the Carrington effect that happened in 1859. Lucky enough, they didn't have a grid system, a power grid system, and so it blew out a few telegraph poles and a few people got electrocuted, but it wasn't anything major. Now in 2012, we had a near miss as well. And the sun seems to be more active. And if we get hit by a coronal mass ejection or maybe an EMP, that will send us back to the Stone Age, and that will kind of reset the clock, so to speak. Now, I'm not saying it's going to make, it could make a major difference to the planet in a negative way, because as you say, if the particles start landing, then the planet's going to heat up within a few weeks, and then we'll all know about it. So, I don't know whether that would be a good thing, but we are due for a coronal mass ejection. So, unless there's something, because we do know that the powers that be have advanced technology, and maybe they do have plans, or maybe they do have something that they're putting in place, because they're going to be included as well. As you said, they can only live in the underground bunkers for so long, and come out to a planet that's a landscape of, that you can't exist in. So it's in their interest to have something planned. I don't know what it is. So there's that possibility as well. I mean, what's your take on kind of the EMP coronal mass ejection idea and the effects that would have on the planet?
Oh, I absolutely agree that we're overdue. I absolutely agree that such an event could turn the lights out for an extended period of time, which almost certainly means forever as far as our species is concerned. And there's little doubt in my mind that the oligarchs who benefit most from this set of living arrangements are making arrangements for themselves to persist longer than you and I. A couple of things to keep in mind there. They won't include us. As George Carlin pointed out, it's a big club. I would say it's a small club, and you ain't in it.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. So I've no doubt that arrangements are being made, and I'm going to return to my acquaintance Steve Wozniak again, who had been reading my work and in 2012 sent me an email message and said that he was moving to Tazmania, the southern island state of Australia, as a result of my work. And once he moved there, I asked him for a couple of small favors, and he was incapable of providing those because he's too busy. Here's a man who is worth, according to Wikipedia, which may not be the most reliable source, but it's probably close enough for our conversation today. Apparently he's worth $100 million. He turns his life upside down, almost literally. He moved to down under and made major changes in the way he lives as a result of my message. But I asked him for a small favor. Can you hook me up with this person, or can you do this one small thing on my behalf? And no, he's too busy. So this is a classic example of the oligarchs maybe having information and not willing to share the spoils of the system that they have helped create and have accelerated towards our demise. They're not going to share that with us. They're not going to share the goodies with you and me. It's a big club, or I think in our case, it's a small club, and you ain't in it, and I'm not either.
Right, okay, well that's quite interesting. Well, bad news for Steve Wozniak, because, if you listen to a lady called Nancy Leader, now it's up to you whether you believe her. People believe in what she's saying and other people don't believe. But according to her, obviously we're going to go through a pole shift. The Earth is changing. We know the magnetic north is moving, and we are going to have a physical shift. A lot of people have talked about this pole shift. It's not just Nancy Leader. Airports have changed their runway signs to reflect this change in the magnetic north. And if Steve Wozniak has moved to Tasmania, well, apparently half of Australia, because the tectonic plate movements with the pole shift, half of the eastern Australia will be underwater, and the other half, the western side, will be above. So as Tasmania is more on the eastern side, he might be underwater. I don't know whether he knows that. I know there's oligarchs moving to the likes of South America, Uruguay and stuff like that. Angela Merkel has land over there. The Bushes have land in South America as well. So they all kind of know something is coming and something's going to happen. And they all have their get-out plans. They also have their silos bought and decked out and ready to go. So you're right there when you say, they know what's going on. And even John Moore, I don't know whether you know John Moore, he has it on his radio show over there. He's an ex-homicide detective, military man. He has a show every day, and he was privy to some information from some naval chaps in the 90s. And they were told what would be happening. And John has a map that they were given regarding the water levels increasing and the changes on the planet. And a lot of these naval guys, if you check it out, have retired to the Ozarks, which happens to be in the middle of North America and very high up. So again, a bit of research to see. Now, these guys might not be able to avoid the climate chaos that's going to be happening, or maybe they know a bit more than we do, and maybe by at least avoiding the sea levels going up might be half the battle in the survival side. Have you heard any of that information?
Well, yeah, and again, I think it falls into the category of two things. It's a big club, and we aren't in it, and they're going to die too, and they're just extending their lives through myriad means, and they might be successful at those, but you have to, at some point, you have to wonder if it's worth it. I was a man of considerable means when I left active service at the university. And I spent an enormous amount of money to create this homestead that I thought would allow me to live longer. And And among the things it did was make me pretty miserable, because the people I'd thrown together with to create this homestead turned out to be people that I didn't really share many values with. And so it made for a difficult excursion down the homestead path. And then somewhere along the line, I realized that even if I live to be 100, that won't be a long time. The world's oldest human being turned 117 years old in early March of last year, 2015. And when asked to ponder the first 117 years of her life at her birthday party, she said, and I quote, "It seemed rather short." She was 117 years old. So I suspect for the likes of us, who probably don't have it in the genetic cards for us to live to be 100, much less 117, that it will seem rather short. And so I started living differently. Somewhere along the line, I started actually taking my own advice and living for those sweet moments when I'm in nature, when I'm with people I love to be with, and so on, and appreciating those moments instead of trying to make for a million moments, appreciating the moments as they come. I think that's the best we can do, no matter how this turns out.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because if you remember what Steve said at the start of the show, and the two of us were talking about this before we got you on, and Steve said about his daughter bringing around her boyfriend. And myself and Steve, although we are of a certain age...
Ladies never tell their age.
Yes, we can't tell their age. We are of a certain age. We don't feel it. So although our bodies might be a certain age, mentally, our minds are young. So we're still getting adjusted to this age thing. And the fact that, and a lot of people have said this to me actually, of our similar age, saying, although our bodies might be this age, our minds are still young. And a lot of people say that. And as you said, this lady who was 117 turned around and said, it seems very fast. And it does seem fast, because, and it's, as you speak to people and you reflect on your life and the things that you've done, you think, wow, that was a very quick few years from, being young and enjoying things to now you have your mortgage and your kids and all the responsibilities that go with that. And, it definitely goes fast. And I think we have to cherish the times we have as much as we can. Unfortunately, with the current system the way it is, and society the way it is, the way the economics of the world globally, with the banks and unemployment and suicides and all that, it's very hard to do. And I know it's easy for us to turn around and say, well, we have to get over that and think positive and everything else. But it is very hard when you're struggling to try and put food on the table for your family and pay bills, because that is the other side of the coin, where there are things that people want to do, but they just can't because they don't have the resources, or financially or physically, or maybe, physically they can't do things as well. So, yeah, I suppose be happy for small mercies, as they say.
Well, yeah, another person we interviewed on my radio show was Katie Goodman, and she's an actress and singer, and she has a song. She says, "Money doesn't matter till you can't eat." And that's right. So, we're all trapped in this monetary system that requires us to make enough money to persist, to survive. And we can't do that unless we have something resembling a job, or we have worked for a while and developed enough money to land in that situation. So that's tough. I understand that. But we still have hundreds of times during every day that we have a choice. We can push this old woman out of the way so we get the last Xbox on the shelf to give to our kid, or we cannot. We can stop and smell this rose that we never noticed before. We can literally stop and smell the flowers. Or we can go ever faster to try to get one step ahead in the grand hamster wheel that is this set of living arrangements. And so what I'm suggesting is that we have dozens, maybe hundreds of these moments every day. Maybe we should stop and recognize them for what they are. And instead of acting like most of us act most of the time, we could take a step back and act with a little dignity, and act with respect towards each other, and love our lives and our moments. Because in the end, I suspect, based on what little I've read about the subject and what little I've heard, in the end, what we have is those moments. And when we're about to turn our light out for the final time, what we remember is relatively few moments in our life. Not who won whatever football game on whatever day, but rather those moments that we created and appreciated with people we love. That's what we're going to take with us in our dying days. So let's contribute to those and make them a little bit better than they otherwise would have been. I think that's with the one thing we have some control over.
Okay.
How we react, how we get along with that relatively small circle of people we're with.
Well, I'm going to put a bit of a positive spin on it if I can. I was listening to an interview during the week, and it's more got to do with manifesting and the ability that we all have to manifest. And we've had a couple of guests on the show talking about more of the spiritual side and the ability that we have if we can just focus that energy. And if you think about it, this is my own belief, okay? And my own belief is that there's multi-dimensional timelines, okay? And depending on your free will and what choice you make will depend on what timeline you're on. So, you wake up in the morning and you can make a choice to get out of bed and go down the stairs, or you can get out of bed and go into the toilet. So that's a different timeline. So there's millions of timelines. And your free will, because our planet is a free will system, chooses which timeline. So every day we are changing our timelines because of free will, because of the choices that we make. Now, if you think about that way of analysing how we work, then we also have the ability as human beings to manifest. And I think, manifestation is a bit like free will. And if you're manifesting negative thoughts and you're thinking on a negative level, and this is more like The Secret and stuff like that, then, chances are you will bring that energy into your space because you're focusing on that. And if we hear too much of the doom and gloom, climate change, Planet X, blah, 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 then obviously everybody manifesting and having that thought pattern, then chances are that might manifest. It's the same kind of principle with when they did meditation, they did a meditation there years ago in America, and you all focused on, there's the dog getting upset there. They were all manifesting, and they were all meditating to bring the crime rate down. And the crime rate actually came down a certain percentage. I mean, quite big on a level that was noticeable. And I know in South Korea there, they had something like 1 million people meditating all at the same time, which didn't go in the papers. It wasn't in the news. But you see, I've seen a picture of it where there's loads of people just, they're meditating. So I think we all have ability to manifest and focus on the good stuff. So we can probably manifest something better, but we all have to realize we have that ability. And maybe start practicing that, meditating, practicing, focusing on what our thoughts are. And I reckon maybe with that, it's a long shot. I know some people might say, I'm not going for that. That's fair enough. But hey, there's no harm in trying.
Well, not only that, regardless of whether we have free will, regardless of whether that manifestation is a result of something we do, we still have the choice every day to decide whether to cut off somebody in traffic or not. We still make all of these choices. We still have great influence, tremendous influence over the relatively few people we interact with on a daily basis. I can ruin the day of somebody I encounter, especially if it's somebody I know well, say somebody at the workplace that I see 5 days a week. I can ruin their day in an instant and destroy our relationship in that instant by saying some horrible thing about the clothes they're wearing and the way their hair looks, or, any number of other things. I can promulgate a rumor about that person. And so we have at some level, we have this tremendous power to destroy and over longer periods of time through many acts to create something beautiful, to create these relationships that we are embedded within. Let's not take any of that for granted. Let's pursue each of those relationships and treat those people as if they matter, because in the end they do. They matter like we matter to ourselves and to those other people. So I don't think that we're saying things that are at odds with each other. Rather, I think that I'm pointing out that we have this tremendous power in this small circle and probably not much beyond that. But that's what really matters. In our daily lives, that small circle is what really matters over a course of weeks and months and years that we spend with a relatively small amount of people, a small number of people.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Have you ever looked at any of Dolores Cannon's work?
No, I'm not even familiar with that name. There's a whole lot of things I don't know, and I'm reminded of that every time I do an interview.
Okay, because it's just that Dolores Cannon talked about this new Earth, that there's the old Earth and the new Earth, and then obviously with the energy that's hitting the planet at the moment, so have been told that it's having a major effect on the planet as well, and that's coming from the center of the galaxy that's hitting the planet, and the Schumann frequency has changed, and because of this energy, that's something that you've come across?
No, I haven't. But again, almost everything that you could bring up, I'm ignorant about. So there's a lot of things I don't know, and in recognizing there's a lot of things I don't know, it greatly limits the number of things I say that aren't wrong.
Okay, because now the reason why I said that, because I do think we're in a transitional period on a planetary level, and where we go or where it goes, I don't know. It's a finger in the air, but we are kind of hearing positive things about what's going on, about energies hitting the planet, people feeling it, and certain changes taking place. Yes, there is a bit of doom and gloom when it comes to the volcanoes going off and the tropical storms and the tsunamis. But that's, to some people, that's just Gaia, Mother Earth, making changes as part of this pole shift that's taking place. And it's kind of slowing down. This kind of, the wobble effect, which is the Chandler effect, they call it, has been slowed down apparently to allow for this pole change, this pole shift, because we are apparently 23 degrees out of alignment. And that the Earth has to come back from that 23 degrees. So that pole shift has to happen. Now, I read a book about this in the early 90s called The Uni Planet of Choice, who mentioned this, and then since kind of being involved in the radio show, speaking to a number of people about this, they all kind of come back with the same kind of near enough the same degrees, that the planet is out of balance and has to be rebalanced. And they've said before, I mean, you mentioned there, this is the 6th time or something that things have happened, and maybe the last 5 were the pole shift, which is the changes taking place. With that possibility?
Sure, and there is evidence at this point that climate change itself is contributing to the shift in the poles, because the melting of the ice and the rebound effect that results are causing the Earth's rotation to change. So I don't think I think a whole lot of things are connected that most people don't realize are connected. And again, from my perspective, what we do as individuals is influenced by the relatively small circle with which we spend our time, and how we imagine we want those relationships to be. The larger scale issues, yeah, there's a lot of things going wrong. Are there things that are going to go right, that are going correctly right now? Sure, I'm sure there are. I don't think that changes my message much. And with respect to abrupt climate change, I'm not sure how our intentions are going to manifest in profound changes that will be beneficial. But I'm very, very open to any positive news and positive actions that can turn this seemingly doomed ship around.
Okay, and are you still doing what you're doing with your house? Are you still growing your own vegetables, solar panels, and saving energy?
As it turns out, once I became a relatively prominent figure in the abrupt climate change discussion, it was increasingly difficult for me to grow food, because if you don't water the food, it tends to die. So I'd put a lot of time into building a garden, and then I'd leave for a couple of weeks, and I'd come back and there wouldn't be a garden there anymore. So like most people, I get most of my food from the grocery store. That's kind of a bummer when I put it that way. It makes me sound sort of Al Gore-like, but that's the trade-off I'm making at this point in my life. Yeah, right.
Well, that's the normal thing. I mean, it's very hard when you're doing travelling and you're going about to actually manage the your garden as well and grow the food. And what about the energy in your home? Are you running solar panels or wind generators, wind turbines?
Yeah, solar panels. Solar panels on the homestead in New Mexico make it completely off-grid, and the well-insulated straw bale construction and the large south-facing windows that provide passive solar heat. And where I spend a lot of my time now in Belize, there are solar panels on the main cabin, the main structure as well. So it's not as if have turned my back on what many people consider solutions. I think that taking right action is a fine choice, and not being terribly attached to the outcome. That's a Buddhist-inspired perspective, that of doing what we think is the right thing, and if it doesn't turn out to correct the situation, well, at least we can look in the mirror every day.
Exactly. Steve, you've got a question there for Guy.
Yeah, a question came in there earlier, Guy, and sometimes questions come in and they don't seem relevant at the time. And, sometimes we don't ask them and sometimes we do. But this one came in earlier on, and I'm just going to throw her out now and see where it brings us. The individual wishes to know, does Guy believe in evolution or creation?
I don't think there's such a thing to believe. I think that we can accept the facts of evolution by natural selection. That's like, do I believe in gravity? Except in this case, with evolution by natural selection, there's far more evidence and a mechanism to understand it than there is with gravity. So I believe in gravity, and I quote, believe in evolution by natural selection. I'm not a creationist.
Okay, fair point. Speaking of gravity, same person wishes to know, why doesn't gravity affect, and we spoke earlier about the metallic sulfate particles, he says, why doesn't gravity affect these metallic sulfate particles in the atmosphere? Do you know?
Oh, yes, it does. They're constantly falling out of the air. They're heavier than the air. They're put up into the atmosphere by industrial activity. So sulfates are the best example. Low quality coal is high in sulfur, and so when burned, sulfates are produced, which is sulfur with oxygen. And those sulfates go up into the atmosphere, and ultimately gravity pulls them back down. They're falling out all the time. It's just that we're putting them up faster than they're falling out at a slightly faster rate. And so it appears, for example, some people think, some climate scientists believe that the economic slowdown in China, therefore not burning as much coal at scale in China within the last few years, they think that's responsible for the absence of global dimming that has triggered this abrupt climate change event. So it could be that that's already underway as a result of the loss of global dimming from those particulates falling out of the sky. We don't know yet. It's a little too early. There's not a bunch of data available on that. So at this point, all we have is the ability to generate hypotheses about why the global average temperature took 265 years to go up 1 degree Celsius and another 4 months to go 0.57 degrees Celsius, another half a degree. So we don't know for sure why that happened. So at this point, we just tell stories about it and try to collect evidence to describe and to come up with a mechanism to describe the pattern.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just out of curiosity, sorry, Steve, why did Steve Wozniak move to Tasmania if we're all doomed?
Because of the time, I didn't know how doomed we all were. And this was 2012, so this goes back about 4 years. He contacted me in late December 2012 and said he was planning to move to the Southern Hemisphere. He didn't specify where at the time. He said he was going to move there in about 2 years. And at that time, I was relatively new to the notion of collecting a bunch of evidence and putting out that evidence indicating abrupt climate change. So I honestly believed that the further south a person was, the closer to Antarctica without actually being in Antarctica, the longer humans would persist. Now I think that might still be the case, but I don't think it's going to be a matter of years anymore. Now I think it's going to be maybe a matter of months or a year or two that people live longer by living in southern Chile or South Africa or New Zealand or Tasmania or wherever. So I don't think it's going to be a large amount of change. 4 years ago, I did think it was going to be a significant amount of change, and I think that's why Wozniak and his wife Janet moved there. Because they believed what I believed at the time.
All right, so does he actually know this? Has he updated his knowledge? Has he been in touch at all to find out that, oh, by the way, I shouldn't have moved here because it's actually going to be irrelevant?
No, not to me. Again, we're not on a daily speaking basis, and he never talks about climate change, much less abrupt climate change, when he's doing public events. So I think that's one of the tragedies here, is that here's a guy who made the significant change in his life, and to my knowledge, he has never explained why. To my knowledge, he has never said, well, there's this guy named climate scientist, named Guy McPherson, who's a conservation biologist, and he thought I would live longer, and I got $100 million at my disposal, so I just thought I'd go down there and live a little longer. So he doesn't say that. And I think that that this falls into the category of people in a position of influence using their influence to make changes that will benefit them, not necessarily in ways that will benefit other people, including putting the information out there. And so I think that's a tragedy, but that's the way the world works.
I'm surprised he doesn't have a golden ticket. Or maybe he does have a golden ticket to with kind of 100 million in the bank, because if you look at, I mean, I know this is Hollywood, but the movie 2012 and the whole idea that how much the tickets cost to get on the Ark with the climate change. I mean, again, they like using Hollywood about to tell us about things that possibly may happen, time and time again, over and over again. And maybe they might have a master plan. You know, we just don't know what it is. So the people at the top, the oligarchs, are the people that we see in the public, like Obama, like Theresa May, and all the presidents and the prime ministers. They all play the game. It's the people behind them. They have the master plan, and maybe they know what's going to happen, or they have some kind of solution. I mean, your man Musk wanted to launch some, the SpaceX with Richard Branson. They wanted to have ships, or crafts that you could actually get in, fly up, and then come back down and reuse. I mean, maybe that's part of their plan. Maybe that's what they want to do.
Yeah, it could be. I tend to believe that there's not a master plan, that these oligarchs are not getting together every year or two and saying, okay, you need to move this piece on the chessboard, and in response, I'm going to move this piece over here, and that's going to provide us oil from the Middle East and Northern Africa for another year or so, and then you're going to be working on the master plan to get us to Mars or whatever. I tend to believe, contrary to that notion, that there's a bunch of free agents out there. People like Steve Wozniak who have a lot of money at their disposal, and sure, maybe they're in contact with the likes of Musk and James Cameron, who has recently bought a bunch of land in New Zealand and so on. Maybe they're in contact periodically, but it would surprise me if they are coming with a master plan that includes a few dozen of them but cuts out the rest of us. So I think that's why Steve Wozniak ends up in a place like like Tazmania, because he wants to extend his life and make his life relatively comfortable for as long as he possibly can. But maybe that explains too why he's not involved with Elon Musk's and Richard Branson, SpaceX, and planning and buying the ticket to Mars. I don't know, because I'm not in that position, and I don't foresee ever being in that position. But that might explain why there are these seemingly different approaches to the relatively near-term lack of habitat on the planet, and that knowledge being known by a relatively few people who are of considerable means.
Well, it's just funny that you said that Cameron is bought land down in New Zealand. That's another thing we heard. That's another location where we've heard certain oligarchs or elites or people in the know are buying land and moving to. So, obviously, Southern Australia, New Zealand, South America. So they all know the Bush family, we know, has quite a bit of property down in South America. So it's just interesting that they're all kind of seem to be all moving south for some reason. So they're obviously expecting whatever's going to happen to affect the northern hemisphere first before it moves down to the south.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that makes a lot of sense, because not only is the global north characterized by way more land and less ocean proportionally than the global south, but it also has essentially all the nuclear generating facilities. All except 4, I believe, of the 440 some are in the northern hemisphere. And that's where we've really trashed the planet to the greatest possible extent, is in the northern hemisphere. So whether you're trying to avoid ionizing radiation or abrupt climate change or methane release leading to catastrophic heating or the erosion and destruction of the planet, it seems like the quote good places that are left to harbor humans are about as far south as you can get. Those are the places we haven't touched massively enough to completely wreck at this point. So it's not too surprising from any number of perspectives that the folks with the money, the folks with the resources are headed south.
And what about the likes of the North and South Pole? You're obviously seeing climate change there, the melting of the polar caps and, rising sea levels?
Absolutely. The Arctic, until a couple of years ago, it was reported that the Arctic was heating more than twice as fast as the global average. Now it's more than 5 times as fast as the global Arctic, as the global average. So the Arctic is heating up really, really fast as the ice disappears, thereby contributing to further ice melt. And as we talked about earlier, that's contributing to the crossing of the jet streams from the northern and southern hemispheres. So it's wreaking global havoc on the climate and therefore on weather systems. What we really have here is a climate emergency that is impacting every place on the planet. Some places more than others. Places like the Arctic, way more than the global average.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of reports on that. And one of the things that we've heard about the sea levels rising, whether that's down to climate change or the pole shift, it has been mentioned on numerous occasions. And this is why we're seeing certain countries that haven't really suffered from flooding, all of a sudden being affected by flooding, and for no apparent reason, or the weather, they have, a month's rain in a couple of hours. I mean, maybe that's down to the climate change. Maybe that's what's causing it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know based on simple physics that a 1 degree increase in global average temperature, that's 1 degree Celsius, produces 7% more moisture in the atmosphere. And then moisture that goes into the atmosphere has to come out of the atmosphere. And it's warmed more than 1.5 degrees above the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, above 1750 global average temperature. So that means there's a lot more moisture in the atmosphere than there used to be, and it's got to come out. And as predicted by climate scientists for the last 40 years, when it comes out, it tends to do so quite rapidly. So now we're seeing, I've come across 2 terms that are brand new to the English lexicon that have to do with abrupt climate change within the last year. There are these things called rain bombs, where the rain just shows up and bombs down on places, and they get, as you just described, a month's worth of rain in a day. And there are also these smoke waves. These forest fires have grown so big, and Tazmania is a classic example. It was thought to be an escape because there are rainforests there that are thousands of years old, and now they're all drying up and turning to crisp. And so what comes out ahead of them, ahead of these super fires, is smoke waves, waves and waves of smoke being produced by these enormous fires, way too big to control, way too big for humans to manage. And so rain bombs and smoke waves, new terms that have come about in the last year or so as a result of abrupt climate change. And we're on the leading edge. We're at the very, very beginning of this event, this abrupt climate change event. So I think we're going to see more terms arise to describe phenomena with which we are so far completely unfamiliar, because we've never seen anything like this.
Well, I will say we won't just be hearing new terms. I think we'll be hearing new swear words on the things that we're saying because we won't believe it. But, Guy, we've reached that time. Again, thank you for coming on the show. The information was fantastic, although little bit on the downside because there seemed to be no solution there. But, you know, at the end of the day, we just have to deal with what we can deal with. I mean, that's just about it, you know. But a big thank you for coming on. I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve's going to get all your contact details where people can find you and find out more about your background and the information that you've been studying. And thanks again for coming on, Steve.
Yeah, Guy, big thanks for coming on, sharing your thoughts with us this evening. Well, I know it's probably daytime where you are, but it's evening where we are. I do have two addresses here for you, guymcpherson.com for a website and also facebook.com, Guy-McPherson. You can let me know if they're correct or incorrect. And just one last thought as well. Do you give talks to governments across the world about this information, or do you just share it with the earthy people?
I know GuyMcPherson.com is correct, and all my additional contact information can be there, email address and so on, including a link to my Facebook page. So you can find everything from GuyMcPherson.com, I think, by going to the About tab at the top of the page. In terms of do I speak about this, yes, absolutely, and I speak for free. So if somebody will pay my travel expenses, I'm there. And my travel schedule can be quite rigorous at times. I'm willing to put up with almost anything. And that has included in the past more than 20 presentations in 10 days. So if you build a schedule for me, if you build an itinerary, I will come and speak to as many people as can tolerate my message in as short a period of time as you want to host me. So thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you today. I greatly appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking to as many people as I can in the near future.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, guys, thanks for coming on. Just stay with us there. We're going to pop over to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
I hope everybody is still whistling out there along to that one. A great little tune. Alan handpicked. That one was by Alan. Because he knew there was, he knew the direction that the show was gonna go tonight. So he said, we need a little bit of a lively one, something to give a little bit of hope.
We needed something there. Now, the whole extinction thing, and I think we all kind of know in ourselves that the planet is in major trouble, and we all know that. We don't need to do any research to tell us that. As to how we deal with it, I don't know. Maybe he's just right. Maybe what you do is just enjoy life. Enjoy as much as you can with the people that you're with, and hope that somewhere down the line something's going to change, and the planet will change, because we have our kids and obviously our kids' kids and all that kind of stuff. So, you never know. I do think I'm kind of optimistic. I know the world is not looking great at the moment, but I don't know, something inside me is making me optimistic to think that change will take place. Something positive will happen. I don't think that, with all the 7 billion people on the planet and everything that we've gone through, it's just going to be, that's our existence over, and, the reset button. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, Thomas was on our show and he talked about the reset button They haven't pressed it yet, and maybe we do have a chance to redeem ourselves. Who knows? But, let's we'll find out anyway. But it's very rare that we have a show where we don't have a positive solution. But sometimes it's always good to know these things anyway, and talk to these people. And maybe Guy has obviously done a lot of research on this, but as he said himself, there's other areas that he's not familiar with, and maybe it's the other areas that are the positive that he's not aware of that will make a change on the planet. So we'll just see what happens. Now, next week we have Karen MacDonald and Paddy Brassard coming on, and they said that there's been so much going on a positive level as well, by the way, not just on a negative, on a positive level. There's been so much going on a positive side that they, on a daily basis, that they wanted to come on and tell us. And next week will be our last show before our break, and we're having a few weeks break because there's a few things that we have to do, a couple of videos that we have to do, and a couple of parts are waiting on to come in to do the videos. So hopefully them parts will be in, so we can actually do the videos and have them up and running. Now, there's one video that I want to do, I'm going to try and do for next week, is that Karen kindly made a massive crystal with a chakra strand above it. And we're going to do a video, put the actual the crystal, you see it moving, you see the size of it, it's massive, big chakra crystal. And Karen Quinn Tostado made this especially for OYM, and what we're going to do is we're going to auction it on the radio, and we're going to start off probably with a minimum of €100, because when you see this thing, it's massive, it's huge, a lovely thing, handmade, one of a kind, straight from Oregon over where Karen is. And Karen does make these, but they're all unique in her own way when she makes them. And the money will go towards the homeless charity. That's the plan of attack. Okay, so it's going to go to a good cause. So I'll try and do the video during the week, and we'll get it up there, and we'll send it out on Facebook and on email so you can actually see it. And then when we do the show next week, we will obviously talk about the auction. And if you want to put a bid on it, we'll start off with €100. Send an email into info@oymradio.com. That'll be the plan of attack, and we'll start off there. And I'll try and do the video. Definitely aim to do the video this week. And if we can get Karen on, even for 10 minutes, to tell us about it, that'd be fantastic. The other thing is, we are meeting up with a group of people next Saturday, and we hope that we will have a good chat with them. We'll be with them probably for a few hours. We're just going to be catching up on stuff and things that they've done, things that we've done. They listen to our show, and we look forward to that. And there's a couple of other things in the pipeline as well. So we are busy bees next week, Steve.
Yes, we are indeed. I'm exhausted just listening to you talking about what we're going to be doing.
I know. So and then obviously you met the in-laws.
No, I haven't met the in-laws, not yet. Plays the thoughts of it. No. That'll be further down the line.
Okay.
But come here. I just want to throw something out there into the mix very quickly. I was just going through the chat room there, and there was a comment, and I just want to say, I'm going to read it out, and I just want to get it out there. But it says, fluid belief system, an excuse to sit on the fence. You guys could set your belief stall out and tailor the show and guests to suit your attempts to get the truth. But 1 week, it's parallel universes on other timelines, world end within weeks. Just want to comment on fluid belief system is an excuse to sit on the fence. When we started, we used to say we sat on the fence. When we started, and we said it for a long time, that we were sitting on the fence in relation to different subjects, different topics. And it kind of hit us one day that we weren't actually sitting on the fence. We weren't kind of taking a neutral standpoint, but what we were doing was we were actually doing kind of research and listening to what each side said. And depending on what each side said, we weigh it up and kind of put it into a little box in our head with a question mark on it. And anyone who kind of wants to know where we're coming from, go onto the website and take a look at the fluid belief system video, because that kind of explains as to exactly where our heads are. Because, some people think that we're sitting on the fence and no, our heads are, planted firmly up our backsides. Well, they're not. We do a lot of research and we do listen to a lot of different people, and we try to kind of unravel it all and make sense of it, because that's actually one of the questions that I did want to get to Guy, just to see where he was, because Guy seemed to have a standpoint, and he wasn't really moving from the standpoint. But it would have been interesting to see, if different evidence presented itself, because each side on every debate each side have all their own information, from all the research and their studies. And obviously it would be interesting if Guy was presented, or anyone for that matter, was presented with evidence saying that, well, things aren't that way, but that this way, would the people, on the left, would they change their opinion to favour those on the right if the evidence pointed in that direction? Or would they firmly just bury their feet and bury their head in the sand and go, no, I'm on the left and this is where I'm going to stay? But yeah, sitting on the fence, sitting on the fence, fluid belief system, I think one has evolved into the other, but we are doing some research and trying to figure the whole thing out.
Can I make a quick comment on that? The fact that it said the fluid belief system is an excuse to sit on the fence just confirms to me that that person actually doesn't understand the fluid belief system, because if they did, they wouldn't make that comment. That's it. And it's not for us to give our opinion or belief. It's up to the listeners to listen to what the guest has to say and form their own opinion. It doesn't matter what we believe or where we are and what we think. It's what you believe and what you think based on the interview that's taken place. Okay,
and the comment just up. He just doesn't like hosts who have a ball earther on as a guest and agree with all that he says. Well, it's not that we agree with everything that the guest says, but there are times when you'll have someone on, and before we go live, we tease them out, we find out exactly where they're coming from. Alan does it all week. He kind of hooks up with the guests prior, and he knows exactly where they're from, whether they're going to move on the information or whether they're kind of stuck in a belief system. So we kind of tailor the questions to extract as much information, kind of a gently approach, rather than just kind of, throw it in their face, because at the end of the day, they're giving up their time for us, and the last thing we want is to have a show planned where we can all kind of get some information and glean some new information, and go on the offensive, attack the guest, and have the guest go, I don't need this, and hang up 15 minutes into an interview, because that will benefit nobody. Yeah, we've been down this road before, and we're not on the attacking side. You need to go to other radio stations for that. We don't do that. We don't play that game. Okay, it's we're going to pass over to Vin on PIR. Vin is there. For myself, Alan James, have a good week, and we'll see you next week. Stay safe. Bye-bye. Okay, for myself, Stephen George, it's been an interesting evening. Thanks to everybody who participated. I'm sorry, I was posting on PIR chat room, but some of my posts weren't going up there, so I do apologise for that. Thanks to everybody who participated in both of the chat rooms. Anyway, thanks to everyone who joined in on the live show, and especially those who are listening on the podcast. We'll do it all again next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.